Time to make the buy buttons work. For that, we'll need a portfolio and some state for that portfolio. So let's work on this next. In this module folder, I'll add a portfolio.js file because I want to set up its own module in our Vuex store. And there we will have a state, of course. And now what is the state of our portfolio? Well, we certainly want to have some funds to work with. I'll set this to 10,000. You may choose, of course, a different amount. And we'll have some stocks in our portfolio. So stocks here refers to the stocks in our portfolio, not to all these stocks available. We then need some mutations, of course. Mutations, again, are what allows us to change our state. And here I want to be able to buy a stock. So this is one action I set up. And this action, therefore, has the state. All mutations get that. And then I know I'll get an object as the second argument. And I'll use destructuring to pull out the stock ID, the quantity, and the stock price. Now, where do these three names in this object come from? How do I know that I will have these three properties? Well, that's basically my order. If we have a look at the stock.view file in the stocks folder, this is how we set up our order with a stock ID, a stock price, and a quantity. And now that is what I'm pulling out of my object here because I know I will get an order if I need to commit a buy stock mutation. So therefore, I can use that. Now in this method, I first want to check if I already do have this stock in my stocks array, because if I do have it, I want to add it and I don't want to create a new item in the array. So I'll first check if I do have a record by accessing my state and then my stock, so this array up here, and then executing find, a method which allows you to find something in the array. Find takes a function as an argument where the element will be passed in automatically, so this will automatically loop through all my elements and then execute this function for each of the elements. And there I want to check if element ID equals stock ID. Keep in mind, if you write this in one line, this always has an implicit return statement in front of it. So this will return true if the ID of the element I'm currently at in my loop matches the ID of the stock I want to buy. So if my array is empty, this will never match. But if my array does have this stock already, it will match at some point, and therefore it will then return this, will return true or false, which again will lead for the find method to return this stock in my array. And I know if record is set that I already do have this stock in my array, and therefore I don't want to push a new item on this array. Instead, I want to take this record, which is the stock which was found in my array, and update the quantity to be the old quantity plus the new quantity I'm getting in the order. However, if this is not the case, then I know it's a new record. In this case, I want to take my state, my stocks there, and push a new object on it. This new object will have an ID of stock ID and a quantity of quantity. So that's the data I want to store in this stocks array in my portfolio, the ID and the quantity. With that, I got all the data I will need later on to also find out what's the price and what's the total value and so on. So that's the buy stock action, or mutation I should say. We also need a method to sell stocks. Here I will also get a state and I will also get an order. Of course, the order will have the same fields as for buying a stock. So all the relevant data which allows me to update my state. Now there I will first find the stock by ID in my array, because I only get stock ID and so on, so I need to find it in my array. And then I want to check if my record quantity is greater than the quantity of what I want to sell. Then this is of course possible, and I therefore want to update my record quantity to be the old quantity minus the quantity of the order. But if I try to sell more than I do have, or exactly the amount of what I have to be precise, I want to remove it from the array. So there I want to splice and find the position of my record, index of record here. And that's what I want. So this will now give me back a new array, will update the array without that item inside of it. And of course I only want to splice this item, so only remove this item which now actually is completely sold. Of course, I'll also need to update my funds. So I'll check my funds here and I will add something equal to the stock price times the quantity. And I need to do the same here when I buy a stock actually. So here I also want to update the funds, but of course here I want to update them to be, well, the funds minus stock price times quantity. With that, we got buy and sell in place. Now let's quickly finish this by adding the action we need. That is only one, the sell stock action, because buy stock is located in my stocks module. So here I will have my sell stock action, which actually also, I can use the method syntax for that too, of course, which gets me my commit method, has an order, and then here I simply want to commit sell stock order. Now you could of course also add the buy stock action here if you think that makes more sense or whatever. I think you can argue for both. I'll leave it in my stocks module for now. And we want to set up the getters here, of course. Now getters, that is simply an object. And now for getting my data, or which getters do I need? Let's start with that. Well, I want to be able to get my current portfolio of stocks. So I definitely want to get my stock portfolio and I want to get my funds. Now let's start with the stock portfolio. There we get the state and we can also inject the other getters into this. And there I want to then return state, stocks, and now I somehow need to, since I only have the IDs in my stocks array, I need to access the stocks on the stocks module. That is why I injected the getters here to find out the ID of my, or the name and so on of the stocks I have in my portfolio. I can use the map method for that. Map allows me to transform each element in my array. So this will automatically input the current element I'm looping through kind of implicitly into this callback function. And in there, I can now set up into what I want to transform this element we're currently at. And this will be run for all elements in my array again. So here I again want to fetch the record. For that, I will use my getters. That refers to my store getters, so my overall store. And there I can find or can use the stocks getter, which of course is the getter I set up here in the stocks module. So I can access this like this. And here find allows me to, again, find an element where I check if the element ID matches my stock ID. Now important, stock refers to the stock we're currently at in this map method, whereas element ID refers to the element of this stocks array in my stocks module, so of all these stocks, not just the ones in my portfolio. So here I'm basically finding the relevant records. And then for each record, I want to return a new object. That is what the elements in my array will get transformed to. And here I return ID, which is stock ID. I want to set the quantity, which is stock quantity. And I want to set the name, which is the name of this record, because I'm not storing this in my local stocks array here. And price, which is the price on the record. Because again, in this local stocks array, I only have ID and quantity, which is why I keep them here. But then I'm reaching out to my overall stocks array to also get name and price. And here I'm basically creating a new array where I mapped all these values, so where I expanded my object in this array to not only have ID and quantity, but now also name and price. And I'm returning it here. So therefore, I'm returning it overall in this getter here. And regarding funds, well, funds only need the state like this. And here I simply want to return state funds, of course, referring to the funds in my state here. So with that in place, let's export it. And then in the next video, let's hook it all up. So we want to export the state, the mutations, the actions, and of course, the getters. With that was quite a lot of work. Of course, there are different ways to set this up. This is always a question of where you want to store things, how you want to handle things. I try to show one setup where we also needed to reach out to another module so that we also can see how that would work. And of course, this is not absolutely necessary. You could simply store your stocks differently. Enough of the talking. Let's move on to the next video where we use all these things to hook everything up and enable buying and selling stocks.